The afternoon light filtered through the massive oak trees that lined the main street of Dust Valley, Arizona, casting long shadows across the weathered storefronts that had stood since the mining boom of the 1940s. Rebecca Harmon sat at her desk in the local newspaper office, a converted hardware store with high ceilings and original hardwood floors. The window air conditioning unit hummed desperately against the early June heat, a battle it was slowly losing as the temperature outside pushed past 95 degrees. Rebecca tapped her pen against the desk, staring at the wedding invitation in her hand. The cream-colored card was edged in gold, the raised lettering announcing the union of Elena Martinez and Thomas Caldwell at the historic Dust Valley Church, followed by a reception at the prestigious Caldwell Ranch. It wasn't the invitation itself that made Rebecca hesitate. It was the handwritten note on the back. "Please come. I need someone I can trust there. Elena." Rebecca and Elena had grown up together in Dust Valley, inseparable throughout elementary and high school, before Elena left for college in Phoenix, and Rebecca stayed to take over her father's struggling local newspaper. Their friendship had dwindled to occasional text messages and yearly Christmas cards, but there had always been an unspoken understanding between them. When one needed help, the other would be there. Rebecca set the invitation down and looked at the photograph on her desk. Elena and herself at 18, arms around each other's shoulders on graduation day, faces full of hope and possibility. She remembered how Elena had sworn she would never return to Dust Valley, a town that had always felt too small for her ambitions. Yet here she was, not only returning, but marrying into the Caldwell family, the wealthiest and most influential name in the county. The Caldwells had owned the largest cattle ranch in the area for 3 generations. Thomas Caldwell Sr. and the family patriarch had expanded into real estate development and water rights, amassing a fortune and political connections that reached all the way to the state capital. His son, Thomas Jr., Elena's fiancé, had the polished good looks of old money and a Harvard business degree. The wedding announcement had been front-page news in Rebecca's paper, though she'd assigned the story to her only staff writer, unable to bring herself to cover it personally. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a message from her brother, Mark. "Got my invitation. You going?" Mark had dated Elena briefly in high school, a relationship that ended abruptly when Elena's father caught them together and forbade the relationship, citing the Harmon family's lack of social standing. Mark had never quite gotten over it. "Yes," Rebecca typed back. "Elena asked me specifically." "Be careful," came his immediate response. "Something doesn't feel right about this whole thing." Rebecca put down her phone and walked to the window, looking out at the town square where preparations for the Dust Valley Summer Festival were underway. The Caldwells funded the annual event, their name prominently displayed on banners that stretched across Main Street. The wedding was scheduled for the weekend after the festival, ensuring that the town would be looking its best for the high-profile guests who would be attending. As she watched townspeople setting up booths and hanging decorations, Rebecca felt a tug of worry. Elena had always been headstrong and independent. What could have prompted her cryptic message? And why, after everything, was she marrying into a family that represented everything she had once rebelled against? The bell above the office door jingled, and Rebecca turned to see Sheriff Dave Miller enter, removing his hat as he stepped into the artificially cooled air. "Afternoon, Rebecca," he said, placing a small stack of papers on the front counter. "Got the police blotter for you." "Thanks, Dave." Rebecca moved to take the reports, weekly listings of minor incidents and traffic violations that filled a small section of the newspaper. "You heard about the big wedding coming up?" Dave asked, though he knew she had. In a town of 2,500 people, everyone knew everything. "I did. In fact, I got an invitation." Dave raised his eyebrows. "Did you now? Didn't realize you and the bride were close. We grew up together before she left for college." Dave nodded slowly. "Well, the whole department's on duty that day. Caldwells want extra security, what with all the out-of-town guests and such." He hesitated, then added, "Heard there might be some protesters, too." "Protesters? At a wedding?" Dave shrugged. "Something about the new resort the Caldwells are building. Environmental groups aren't happy about the water usage. Thomas Sr. got the permits pushed through despite the drought concerns." Rebecca made a mental note to look into the story. I'll keep that in mind. After Dave left, Rebecca sat back down at her desk and opened her laptop. She typed Elena Martinez Thomas Caldwell into the search bar and began scrolling through results. Social media showed a smiling couple at charity galas and political fundraisers, Elena looking stunning in designer dresses, her dark hair and olive skin striking against Thomas's fair complexion. But there was something about Elena's smile that didn't reach her eyes, a tension in her posture even as she stood close to her fiancé. Rebecca had known Elena long enough to recognize when her friend was putting on a performance. As the sun began to set outside, casting the office in a golden glow, Rebecca made her decision. She would attend the wedding, not just as a guest, but as a journalist and a friend. Something wasn't right, and if Elena needed help, Rebecca would be there to provide it. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Elena. "Got your invitation. I'll be there. What's going on?" The response came hours later, just as Rebecca was locking up the office. "Thank you, can't explain now. Just watch who stands beside me at the altar." Rebecca stared at the cryptic message as a chill ran down her spine despite the lingering heat. What had her friend gotten herself into? Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. If you enjoy stories that weave together mystery, relationships, and small-town secrets with real-life emotional weight, subscribing means you won't miss the next chapter of this unfolding drama. Elena Martinez stood in the guest bedroom of her parents' modest ranch house on the outskirts of Dust Valley, staring at her reflection in the antique vanity mirror. Her wedding dress hung from the closet door, a custom designer gown that cost more than her father made in 6 months. The white satin seemed to glow in the morning light, beautiful and imposing. 3 days until the wedding. 3 days until she became Mrs. Thomas Caldwell. Her phone chimed with another text from Thomas. "My parents want to go over the seating arrangements again. Dinner at the ranch tonight, don't be late." "No, I love you. No, can't wait to see you. Just instructions as always." Elena typed back a simple okay and set the phone down. She opened the vanity drawer and pulled out a small velvet pouch, emptying its contents into her palm, a silver locket, tarnished with age. Inside was a photo of herself as a child, sitting on her grandfather's knee. The inscription inside read, "La verdad siempre sale a la luz." The truth always comes to light. Her grandfather had given it to her on his deathbed, making her promise to remember where she came from, no matter where life took her. She clasped the locket around her neck, tucking it beneath her blouse. It would be her something old at the wedding, a piece of her true self hidden beneath the surface. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Elena, Rebecca Harmon is here to see you," her mother called. Elena's heart skipped. She hadn't expected Rebecca to come by so soon, but perhaps it was better this way. She opened the door and saw her old friend standing awkwardly in the living room, looking just as she remembered. Practical jeans and a button-up shirt, notebook in hand, journalist even in her casual visits. "Rebecca," Elena moved forward, embracing her friend tightly. "Thank you for coming." Rebecca returned the hug before pulling back to study Elena's face. "Your message had me worried. What's going on?" Elena glanced at her mother, who was hovering nearby, pride and anxiety warring on her face. "Mama, could you give us a few minutes?" Mrs. Martinez nodded, though reluctance showed in her movements as she retreated to the kitchen. Once they were alone, Elena led Rebecca to the bedroom and closed the door. "I don't even know where to start," Elena said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm getting married in 3 days and Her voice caught. "Having second thoughts?" Rebecca asked gently. Elena laughed, a hollow sound. "Second, third, fourth, but it's not that simple." "It never is with the Caldwells," Rebecca said. "What did you mean about watching who stands beside you?" Elena looked toward the window, at the distant mountains that surrounded Dust Valley. "Thomas's best man. It's Michael Reyes." Rebecca's expression remained blank for a moment before recognition dawned. "Michael Reyes from high school? The one who went to work for the Caldwells Ranch?" "The same, except he's more than just an employee now. He's Thomas's right-hand man, handles all the business dealings too delicate for public scrutiny." Elena twisted the engagement ring on her finger, a massive diamond that caught the light, including the resort development that's draining the aquifer and threatening half the farms in the county. Rebecca pulled out her notebook. I've heard rumors about that project. The environmental impact report was suspiciously favorable. Because it was fabricated, Elena said, lowering her voice. I found documents in Thomas's study. They know exactly what they're doing, buying up land that will soon be worthless without water access, then selling the water rights back to desperate farmers at exorbitant prices. Rebecca's journalist instincts kicked in. Do you have copies of these documents? Elena shook her head. Not yet, but Michael has the originals in a safe at his house. He's been bragging about it to Thomas, thinking no one else was listening. And Thomas is okay with all this? Elena's eyes hardened. Thomas does whatever his father tells him to do. The business, the marriage, it's all part of the Caldwell legacy. She paused, looking down at her hands. I never thought I'd end up here. When I left for college, I swore I'd never come back to Dust Valley. Then why did you? Rebecca asked the question that had been bothering her since she received the invitation. Elena stood and moved to the window, her back to Rebecca. My father's medical bills. The Caldwells own the hospital. One word from Thomas Sr., and suddenly the debt vanished. Then they offered my father a management position at the ranch, triple what he was making at the factory. She turned back to Rebecca, tears in her eyes. What was I supposed to do? My parents would have lost everything. Rebecca felt a surge of anger. So they essentially bought you. It wasn't like that at first, Elena insisted. Thomas was charming, attentive. I thought maybe I could learn to love him, that my parents' security would be worth it. She wiped at her eyes. But then I started noticing things. The way he speaks to service workers, how he talks about the illegals working the fields, not knowing my own grandmother crossed the border without papers, the casual cruelty. She took a deep breath. And then I found out about the water rights scheme. Have you tried talking to Thomas about it? Elena laughed bitterly. Thomas doesn't see anything wrong with what they're doing. He calls it smart business, says the people affected should have been more strategic with their investments. So what's your plan? Rebecca asked, sensing there was more to the story. I need to get into Michael's house before the wedding. The safe combination is Thomas's birthday. He uses the same code for everything. Elena's eyes met Rebecca's. I need your help, as a friend and as a journalist. These documents need to come to light. Rebecca hesitated. Breaking into someone's house is a crime, Elena. So is what they're doing to this town, Elena countered. You've always cared about the truth, Rebecca. Has that changed? Before Rebecca could answer, they heard a car pull up outside. Elena moved to the window and stiffened. It's Thomas. You need to go. He can't know we've been talking like this. Rebecca stood, torn between concern for her friend and the weight of what she was being asked to do. Elena, are you sure you're safe? If the Caldwells found out what you're planning. I'll be fine, Elena said, though her voice lacked conviction. The wedding is my cover. No one will suspect anything until it's too late. She squeezed Rebecca's hand. Please. I can't do this alone. Rebecca nodded slowly. I'll help you. But promise me you'll be careful. As Rebecca left through the back door, she passed Thomas entering through the front, tall, impeccably dressed, and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The same smile she had noticed in all the photographs. The Dust Valley Summer Festival was in full swing as Rebecca made her way through the crowded town square. Vendors sold handcrafted goods and local produce while children raced between booths, their laughter mingling with country music playing from speakers mounted on light poles. A large banner suspended above Main Street proclaimed, "Proudly sponsored by Caldwell Enterprises" in bold letters. Rebecca's press badge granted her access to all areas of the festival, but her mind was elsewhere. Since her conversation with Elena 2 days ago, she had been researching the Caldwell Resort development, finding disturbing patterns of water permit approvals that bypassed normal channels, all signed off by state officials who had received generous campaign contributions from the Caldwell family. Penny for your thoughts? Rebecca turned to find her brother Mark beside her, camera in hand. Though he had moved to Phoenix years ago to work as a professional photographer, he always returned for the festival to capture images for his ongoing documentation of small-town American life. "Just thinking about the wedding," Rebecca replied, keeping her voice casual. Mark's expression darkened. "I still can't believe she's going through with it. The Elena I knew would never have settled for someone like Thomas Caldwell." "People change," Rebecca said, though she didn't believe it herself. "Or they get trapped," Mark countered. He looked around at the festival, at the families enjoying themselves beneath the Caldwell banners. This whole town is under their thumb, and most people don't even realize it. Rebecca was about to respond when she noticed Michael Reyes walking through the crowd, stopping occasionally to shake hands with festival goers, like a politician on the campaign trail. He was dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, but the Rolex on his wrist and the custom boots on his feet spoke of his elevated status. "I need to talk to him," Rebecca said suddenly. Mark followed her gaze. "Michael? Why?" "Just want a quote about the wedding security arrangements," she lied. "Wait here." Rebecca approached Michael, putting on her best professional smile. "Mr. Reyes?" "Rebecca Harmon from the Dust Valley Gazette. Do you have a moment?" Michael turned, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Rebecca, it's been a while." His tone was guarded but polite. "I'm doing a piece on the wedding," Rebecca explained, pulling out her notebook. "I understand you're the best man?" "That's right." He smiled, revealing perfect white teeth. "Thomas and I have been close since I started working at the ranch. When you find someone you can trust in this world, you hold on to them." Rebecca nodded, jotting down notes. "And how did you rise from ranch hand to Thomas's right-hand man so quickly? That's quite the success story." The smile faltered slightly. "Hard work and loyalty. The Caldwells reward both." "I'm sure they do," Rebecca said, maintaining eye contact. "I'm particularly interested in your work on the new resort development. I understand you're overseeing the water rights acquisitions?" Michael's expression hardened. "Who told you that?" "I'm a journalist, Mr. Reyes. I have sources." Rebecca kept her voice steady despite the sudden tension. "Some local farmers are concerned about the impact on the aquifer." "Those concerns are unfounded," Michael said dismissively. "The environmental impact report cleared us completely." The same report that was approved in record time by Commissioner Daniels, who received a $50,000 donation from Caldwell Enterprises last year. Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You should be careful about making accusations without proof, Ms. Harmon, especially with your family's history in this town." The threat was veiled, but clear. Rebecca's father had lost his construction business years ago after challenging a Caldwell development project, forced to sell the local newspaper to avoid complete financial ruin. "I'm just asking questions, Mr. Reyes. That's my job." "Well, here's a quote for your article," Michael said, his tone suddenly amiable again as a group of festival goers passed nearby. "The Caldwell family is proud to bring economic opportunity to Dust Valley through sustainable development that respects our natural resources and community values." Rebecca wrote it down, word for word. "One more question. How do you feel about Elena Martinez joining the Caldwell family?" Something flickered in Michael's eyes, surprise perhaps or concern. "Elena is a lovely woman. Thomas is a lucky man." "And do you think she's lucky too?" Michael stared at her for a long moment. "Everyone who becomes part of the Caldwell circle is fortunate, Ms. Harmon. The benefits far outweigh any adjustments required." Before Rebecca could press further, Michael's phone rang. He checked the screen and stepped away. "If you'll excuse me, I need to take this. Good luck with your article." Rebecca watched him walk away, typing something on his phone as he moved. She had a sinking feeling he wasn't just answering a call. Mark appeared at her side. "What was that about?" "Just gathering information," Rebecca said vaguely. "Have you been to Michael's house since you've been back in town?" Mark looked confused by the change in subject. "No, why would I? I heard he built a place out near Copper Creek. Supposed to be impressive. Understanding dawned on Mark's face. You want me to scout it out, why? Rebecca hesitated, then made a decision. I need to get in there and I need your help. Break in? Are you out of your mind? Mark hissed, pulling her toward a quieter corner of the festival. What's going on, Rebecca? She told him everything Elena had shared, watching his expression shift from disbelief to anger to determination. So she's being forced into this marriage to save your parents, Mark said when she finished. And the Caldwells are planning to basically steal the water rights from half the county. That's the gist of it. Mark ran a hand through his hair. God, I knew they were corrupt. But this is another level. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'm in. When do we do this? Tonight, Rebecca said. The rehearsal dinner is at the Caldwell Ranch. Everyone who matters will be there, including Michael. That doesn't give us much time to prepare. We don't have much time, period. The wedding is in 2 days. As they talked, Rebecca noticed Thomas Caldwell Sr. making his way through the festival, shaking hands and patting children on the head, like a benevolent king surveying his domain. At his side was Sheriff Dave Miller, laughing at something the older man had said. Look at that, Mark muttered. Even the law is in their pocket. Rebecca thought about Elena, trapped in a relationship built on manipulation and coercion, about to marry into a family that saw people as assets to be acquired or obstacles to be removed. She thought about her own family's history with the Caldwells, and about all the other families who would suffer if the water rights scheme went forward. Tonight, she repeated firmly. We need those documents. As the festival continued around them, a comment CTA appeared for the audience. If you were in Rebecca's position, would you risk everything to expose the truth and help your friend? Comment below with what you would do if you discovered powerful people were hurting your community. The moon hung full and bright over the desert landscape as Rebecca and Mark parked their car half a mile from Michael Reyes's house, a modern glass and steel structure that seemed out of place against the rugged terrain. They had driven with the headlights off for the last quarter mile, using only the moonlight to guide them along the dirt road. This is insane, Mark whispered as they gathered their supplies, flashlights, gloves, a small digital camera, and a USB drive. If we get caught, we're looking at breaking and entering charges at minimum. We won't get caught, Rebecca insisted, though her racing heart betrayed her confidence. Michael posted on social media an hour ago. He's at the rehearsal dinner giving a toast. We have a 2-hour window at most. They made their way toward the house, keeping low and using the scattered desert vegetation as cover. Security lights illuminated the perimeter of the property, but the house itself was dark. As they drew closer, Rebecca spotted 2 security cameras mounted above the front entrance. Back door, she murmured, pointing to a side path that appeared to lead around the building. The rear of the house featured a large patio and pool area with less lighting. A sliding glass door led into what looked like a kitchen. Rebecca tried the handle, finding it locked as expected. Now what? Mark asked. Rebecca pulled a small tool from her pocket, a credit card-sized piece of flexible plastic she'd bought online after watching a lock-picking tutorial. Now we see if this actually works like the video said. To her surprise and relief, after a minute of maneuvering, the lock disengaged with a soft click. They slipped inside, closing the door behind them. The interior of the house was minimalist and expensive, all clean lines and designer furniture. They moved carefully through the kitchen into a spacious living area, their flashlights revealing high ceilings and abstract artwork on the walls. The office should be this way, Rebecca said, remembering the floor plan they had found online for the architectural firm that had designed the house. That's where the safe should be. They found the office behind a heavy wooden door, a masculine space with leather furniture and a large desk positioned to face the door. Behind the desk was a bookshelf filled with leather-bound volumes that Rebecca suspected had never been read. Look for a safe, she instructed, beginning to scan the walls with her flashlight. Mark moved to the bookshelf, running his hands along the edges. Classic hiding spot behind books, maybe? After several minutes of searching, they found it, not behind the bookshelf, but beneath a painting of the Caldwell Ranch. The safe was small but modern, with a digital keypad. Thomas's birthday, Rebecca murmured, entering the date, 081587. The safe beeped once and remained locked. Try it again, Mark urged. Rebecca entered the numbers more carefully, but the result was the same. It's not working. Maybe Elena got it wrong? Rebecca shook her head. She was certain. She tried the date in reverse, then with different formatting, but nothing worked. We need to go, Mark said, glancing at his watch. We've been here too long already. Rebecca stared at the keypad, frustration mounting. Then a thought occurred to her. Wait, Elena said Thomas uses the same code for everything. What if it's not his birthday, but something else that's important to him? She pulled out her phone and opened a social media page for Caldwell Enterprises, scrolling through posts until she found what she was looking for, a celebration of the company's founding date. Try this, Mark suggested, pointing to the date. Rebecca entered the numbers, 042752. The safe beeped twice, and they heard a click. The founding of the Caldwell Empire, Rebecca said as she pulled open the door. Of course that would matter more to him than his own birthday. Inside the safe were several folders and a small stack of cash. Rebecca grabbed the folders and began quickly photographing each page with her digital camera while Mark kept watch at the door. Hurry, he whispered. We've been here almost 20 minutes. Rebecca worked as fast as she could, making sure to capture every document. The contents confirmed everything Elena had told her. Falsified environmental reports, evidence of bribes to government officials, and detailed plans for acquiring water rights at deflated prices. This is worse than we thought, she muttered, as she photographed a map showing which properties would be targeted first. They're planning to drain the aquifer completely within 5 years. Once she had documented everything, Rebecca carefully returned the folders to the safe exactly as she had found them and closed it. Got it. Let's go. They made their way back through the house, careful to leave everything as they had found it. Just as they reached the sliding door, headlights swept across the driveway. Someone's here, Mark hissed, pulling Rebecca away from the door. They crouched behind the kitchen counter, hearts pounding as they heard a car door slam, followed by the sound of keys in the front door. Voices drifted into the house, Michael's distinctive tone, accompanied by a woman's laughter. I thought he was at the rehearsal dinner, Mark whispered. He was supposed to be, Rebecca replied, mind racing. We need another way out. They crawled along the floor toward a hallway leading away from the front entrance, hoping to find another exit. The voices grew louder as Michael and his companion moved into the living room. Can I get you a drink? Michael was asking. Whiskey, neat, the woman replied. Her voice sounded familiar, but Rebecca couldn't place it. They reached a small bathroom with a window above the toilet. Mark climbed up and tested it, finding it unlocked. This leads to the side yard, he whispered. I'll go first and help you out. He squeezed through the opening and dropped to the ground outside. Rebecca handed him the camera and was about to follow when she heard Michael's voice much closer. Just need to check something in my office first, he was saying. Make yourself comfortable. Rebecca froze as she heard footsteps moving down the hallway toward the office. If he checked the safe and noticed anything out of place, she quickly pulled herself up to the window, grateful for the yoga classes that had improved her upper body strength. Mark reached up to help her through just as she heard the office door open. They dropped to the ground and pressed themselves against the side of the house, not daring to breathe. Through the open window, they could hear Michael moving around in the office. There was a pause, then the sound of the safe being opened. Please don't notice anything, Rebecca prayed silently. After what seemed like an eternity, they heard the safe close and footsteps moving away. Only then did they dare to move, creeping along the side of the house and making their way back to the desert scrub that would provide cover for their escape. They were halfway to their car when they heard a shout from the house. A security light flooded the yard, and Michael's voice called out, "Who's there?" "Run," Mark whispered, and they broke into a sprint, abandoning stealth for speed. They reached the car and tumbled inside, Rebecca's hands shaking so badly she fumbled with the keys. Finally, the engine roared to life, and they sped away, keeping the headlights off until they reached the main road. "Do you think he saw us?" Rebecca gasped, her heart still pounding. Mark shook his head. "I don't think so. but he definitely knows someone was there. Rebecca gripped the steering wheel tightly. It doesn't matter now. We have what we needed. She glanced at the camera on Mark's lap. We have the truth. What now? Mark asked. Now we talk to Elena. She needs to see these before she makes her decision. Rebecca checked the time. The rehearsal dinner should be wrapping up. We can meet her at her parents' house. As they drove back toward town, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message. She asked Mark to read it. It's from Elena, he said, his voice suddenly tight. It says, "Can't talk tonight. Being watched. Meet me at the church tomorrow before the rehearsal. Come alone." Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. She's scared. We all should be, Mark replied, looking back at the road behind them. We just stole documents from people who buy and sell everything they touch, including people. Rebecca thought about Elena, preparing to walk down the aisle to a man whose family treated the town and its residents like pieces on a chessboard. She thought about her own family's history with the Caldwells, and about all the other families who would lose everything if the water rights scheme went forward. Some things are worth the risk, she said quietly, pressing harder on the accelerator as they sped toward town. The morning of the wedding rehearsal dawned clear and hot, the June sun already fierce by 9 o'clock. Rebecca sat in her car outside the Dust Valley Church, a small white building with a bell tower that had stood at the center of town since 1912. The parking lot was empty, except for a single groundskeeper watering the flowers that lined the walkway to the entrance. Rebecca checked her watch again. Elena had asked to meet at 9, but it was now nearly 9:30 with no sign of the bride-to-be. The USB drive containing copies of all the documents felt heavy in her pocket, a weight of responsibility and risk. Her phone rang. Mark. Any sign of her? He asked without preamble. No, and I'm getting worried, Rebecca replied, scanning the street. This isn't like Elena. Maybe she got held up at the Caldwells. The rehearsal isn't until noon, right? Right, but... Rebecca stopped as a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the church parking lot. Hold on. Someone's here. The vehicle parked several spaces away, and Rebecca tensed, uncertain who might emerge. To her relief, it was Elena, looking elegant but tired in a simple white sundress. She glanced around nervously before hurrying toward Rebecca's car. I'll call you back, Rebecca told Mark, ending the call as Elena slipped into the passenger seat. I'm sorry I'm late, Elena said, her voice strained. Thomas's mother insisted on reviewing the floral arrangements this morning. I couldn't get away. It's okay, Rebecca assured her, taking in her friend's appearance. Elena's usual confidence seemed diminished, her movements cautious, her eyes constantly checking the surroundings. Are you all right? You seem on edge. I'm fine, Elena said, not very convincingly. Did you get the documents? Rebecca nodded, pulling out the USB drive. Everything was there, just like you said. It's worse than we thought, Elena. They're not just planning to control the water. They're going to drain the aquifer completely, making all the surrounding farmland worthless. Then they'll buy it for pennies on the dollar and repurpose it for luxury housing and golf courses. Elena took the USB drive, her hand trembling slightly. I knew it. Thomas Sr. has been talking about a total transformation of the valley for years. This is what he meant. She closed her fingers around the small device. This is enough to stop them, right? It should be, Rebecca said. There's clear evidence of fraud, bribery of public officials, and environmental violations. The state attorney general would have to act. Elena nodded slowly. I'll get this to my cousin in Phoenix. She works for the Environmental Protection Division of the state government. She slipped the drive into her purse, then looked directly at Rebecca. But first, I need to go through with the rehearsal. If I cancel now, they'll know something's wrong. Rebecca frowned. Are you sure that's safe? Once these documents become public, I'll be on my honeymoon by then, Elena said with a grim smile. Or at least that's what Thomas thinks. I have a plan. She checked her watch. The rehearsal is in 2 hours. The wedding is tomorrow. By tomorrow night, this will all be over, one way or another. What do you mean, one way or another? Rebecca asked, concerned by her friend's tone. "Elena, if you're in danger—" "I'm fine," Elena repeated more firmly this time. "I just need you to do one more thing for me. At the rehearsal today, watch Michael carefully. There's something else you need to know about him." "What is it?" Elena shook her head. "Not now. You'll understand when you see him with Thomas. Just observe them together." Before Rebecca could press further, Elena's phone chimed with a text message. She checked it and her expression tightened. "It's Thomas. He wants to know where I am." She quickly typed a response. "I told him I'm picking up my grandmother from the airport." "Is your grandmother coming to the wedding?" Elena's smile was sad. "My grandmother has been dead for 5 years, but Thomas doesn't know that. He's never bothered to learn anything about my family." She opened the car door. "I need to go. Remember, watch Michael at the rehearsal." "Elena, wait." Rebecca reached out to stop her friend, but Elena was already sliding out of the car. "What aren't you telling me?" Elena paused, half in and half out of the vehicle. "The truth is always more complicated than it seems, Rebecca. Sometimes people aren't who you think they are." She squeezed Rebecca's hand. "Thank you for being my friend. No matter what happens, remember that." With that cryptic statement, she closed the door and hurried back to the waiting SUV. Rebecca watched as the vehicle pulled away, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. She called Mark back immediately. "She came," she told him when he answered. "But something's not right. She's planning something for tomorrow and she won't tell me what it is." "That doesn't sound good," Mark replied. "What are you going to do?" Rebecca started her car. "Go to the rehearsal as planned. Elena wants me to watch Michael and Thomas together. She says there's something I need to see. Be careful, Rebecca. If the Caldwells suspect anything—" "I know. I'll call you after the rehearsal." The church was transformed when Rebecca returned at noon. Florists bustled about, arranging elaborate displays of white roses and lilies. A red carpet had been laid down the center aisle, and workers were setting up additional chairs to accommodate the 200 guests expected for the ceremony. Rebecca found a seat in the back row, her press badge giving her legitimate reason to be present. The Caldwells had invited local media to cover the event, though with strict guidelines about which photographs could be taken and which questions could be asked. Thomas Caldwell Sr. and his wife, Margaret, entered first, followed by the minister and several members of the wedding party. Thomas Jr. arrived next, handsome in a tailored suit, his expression one of practiced charm as he greeted guests and directed the proceedings with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in charge. Michael Reyes entered last, and Rebecca felt herself tense at the sight of him. Had he recognized them at his house the night before? If so, he gave no indication, chatting amicably with the groomsmen and slapping Thomas Jr. on the back with easy familiarity. The rehearsal began, with the minister explaining the order of the ceremony and positioning everyone at the altar. Thomas Jr. stood front and center, with Michael directly beside him as best man. When Elena entered from the back of the church, escorted by her father, all eyes turned to her. She moved gracefully down the aisle, her face composed into a serene mask that revealed nothing of the turmoil Rebecca knew she felt inside. As Elena took her place beside Thomas at the altar, Rebecca studied the tableau before her, trying to see what Elena wanted her to notice. Thomas and Michael stood side by side, both tall and confident, both smiling at the bride. And then Rebecca saw it. It was in the way Michael looked at Elena when he thought no one was watching. Not with the appreciation of a friend admiring a beautiful bride, but with the intensity of someone who had deeper feelings. It was in the way his hand brushed against Thomas's arm, lingering just a fraction too long. It was in the way Thomas leaned slightly toward Michael when they spoke, the intimate familiarity of their body language. The realization hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Thomas and Michael weren't just business associates or friends, they were lovers, using Elena as a cover for a relationship that the conservative Caldwell family would never accept. Suddenly, everything made more sense. Why Thomas had pursued Elena despite having no real interest in her. Why Michael had risen so quickly through the Caldwell ranks. Why Elena had noticed Thomas's lack of genuine affection. She was a convenient shield, a socially acceptable partner for the Caldwell heir, while the real relationship remained hidden in plain sight. Rebecca watched as the minister directed them through the ceremony, noticing now the subtle glances between Thomas and Michael, the careful distance they maintained in public while still gravitating toward each other. How had she not seen it before? After the rehearsal concluded, the wedding party moved to the church hall for a light lunch. Rebecca hung back, observing from a distance as Elena made polite conversation with Thomas's relatives, her smile never reaching her eyes. Michael remained close to Thomas throughout, the perfect best man attending to the groom's every need. As the gathering began to disperse, Rebecca saw her opportunity to speak with Elena. The bride-to-be had stepped away to use the restroom, and Rebecca followed, finding her alone in the small powder room adjacent to the church hall. "I saw it," Rebecca said without preamble once the door was closed behind them. "Thomas and Michael." Elena's shoulders slumped slightly, the mask of composure falling away. "I thought you might. You've always been observant. How long have you known?" "Almost from the beginning," Elena replied, checking her reflection in the mirror and adjusting a strand of hair with mechanical precision. Little things at first. The way Thomas was never really interested in being intimate, the late-night phone calls with Michael, the business trips they always took together. She met Rebecca's eyes in the mirror. "I found them together 3 months ago at the ranch house. They didn't know I was coming back early from a charity event." "And you still agreed to go through with the wedding?" Rebecca couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "What choice did I have?" Elena turned to face her. "If I backed out, my parents would lose everything. The Caldwells would make sure of that. And Thomas..." She shook her head. "Thomas is trapped too, in his own way. His father would disown him if he knew the truth." "So you're protecting them? After everything they've done?" "No," Elena said firmly. "I'm protecting myself and my family. The wedding gives me the leverage I need." She lowered her voice further. "Once these documents become public, the Caldwells will be facing federal charges, but I need to be Thomas's wife when it happens." "Why?" "Because as his wife, I'll have legal protections. I can claim I knew nothing about the scheme, that I was just an innocent bystander. The prosecutors will want my testimony against the family, and I'll be in a position to negotiate. Immunity for myself and financial security for my parents." Rebecca stared at her friend, seeing her in a new light. The naive girl she had grown up with had become a strategic player in a dangerous game. "That's calculating." "I learned from the best," Elena said with a bitter smile. "The Caldwells taught me that everything and everyone has a price." Her expression softened. "But you don't, Rebecca. You never have. That's why I trusted you with this." Before Rebecca could respond, there was a knock at the door. "Elena, are you in there?" It was Thomas's mother, her voice sharp with impatience. "Coming, Mrs. Caldwell," Elena called, her mask of pleasant compliance slipping back into place. She squeezed Rebecca's hand. "Tomorrow. Be there, please, no matter what happens." As Elena left to rejoin the wedding party, Rebecca stayed behind in the restroom, her mind racing. She had come to help her friend escape a loveless marriage, only to discover that Elena had her own agenda, one that was potentially just as calculating as the Caldwell's schemes. But could she blame her? In a world where the powerful used everyone else as pawns, perhaps the only way to survive was to learn to play the game. Rebecca left the church deep in thought, unaware of the figure watching her from the shadows of the bell tower, Michael Reyes, his expression unreadable as he tracked her movements across the parking lot. The day of the wedding arrived with a cloudless blue sky and a heat that shimmered off the pavement outside the Dust Valley Church. By 10 in the morning, the temperature had already climbed to 90 degrees, but inside the church, powerful air conditioning kept the space cool and comfortable for the guests who began arriving an hour before the ceremony. Rebecca sat midway down the left side of the church, her press badge visible but unobtrusive. She had chosen a simple blue dress that wouldn't draw attention, though her position allowed her a clear view of the altar where Thomas Caldwell Jr. now stood with Michael Reyes and the other groomsmen. Thomas looked every inch the successful heir in his custom tuxedo, his posture confident, his smile practiced as he greeted important guests who approached to offer congratulations. Michael stood beside him, equally polished but more reserved, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. The church filled quickly, state politicians, business associates of the Caldwell family, and local dignitaries taking the front rows, while Elena's more modest family and friends were seated toward the back. The disparity was obvious and intentional, a visible reminder of the social hierarchy that placed the Caldwells at the top. Rebecca checked her phone one last time before silencing it. No messages from Elena since the cryptic text that morning. Whatever happens today, know that I made my choice with open eyes. The message had left Rebecca uneasy, but there had been no opportunity to speak with Elena before the ceremony. The bride was sequestered in a small room at the back of the church with her bridesmaids and mother, following the tradition of keeping the groom from seeing her before the wedding. As the string quartet began playing classical music, Rebecca noticed Mark slipping into the church, taking a seat near the back. He wasn't officially invited, but no one questioned his presence. Many guests had brought +1s, and security was focused on keeping out protesters, not scrutinizing every attendee. Mark caught her eye and gave a subtle nod. They had agreed he would be present as backup, just in case. For what? Neither of them was quite sure, but the tension surrounding this wedding made both siblings feel that additional support might be necessary. At precisely noon, the music changed to the traditional wedding processional. The bridesmaids began their walk down the aisle, followed by a flower girl scattering white rose petals. The guests rose as the bridal march began, all heads turning toward the back of the church where Elena appeared on her father's arm. She was stunning in her designer gown, the white satin flowing like water as she moved slowly down the aisle. Her dark hair was arranged in an elegant updo, adorned with small white flowers, and her makeup was flawless, highlighting her natural beauty without overwhelming it. But it was her expression that caught Rebecca's attention, a serene determination that spoke of someone who had made a difficult decision and was prepared to see it through. Elena's father looked proud but nervous as he escorted his daughter toward Thomas. When they reached the altar, he kissed her cheek and placed her hand in Thomas's before stepping back to join his wife in the front row. The minister welcomed the congregation and began the ceremony with a prayer, followed by a brief homily about the sanctity of marriage. Throughout it all, Elena stood perfectly still beside Thomas, her face composed, her eyes occasionally flickering to Michael, who maintained his position as best man with rigid formality. When the time came for the vows, Thomas recited his with practiced ease, promising to love and cherish Elena for all his days. If anyone noticed the lack of genuine emotion in his delivery, they gave no sign, applauding politely when he finished. Then it was Elena's turn. She took a deep breath, turning to face Thomas fully. "I, Elena Maria Martinez," she began, her voice clear and steady, "take you, Thomas James Caldwell, Jr., to be my husband." She paused, and a subtle shift occurred in her demeanor, a straightening of her shoulders, a lifting of her chin. "I promise to be faithful and true to you," she continued, "in good times and bad, in sickness and health." Another pause, longer this time. The minister looked confused, glancing down at his notes as if checking whether he had missed something. "I promise to love and honor you," Elena said, her voice growing stronger, "and to always speak the truth, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult." A murmur ran through the congregation. This wasn't the standard vow they had rehearsed. "The truth," Elena said, turning slightly to face the congregation while still holding Thomas's hands, "is that this marriage is based on a lie." Gasps and exclamations filled the church. Thomas's face drained of color, and beside him, Michael went rigid. "Elena," Thomas hissed, trying to maintain his smile for the confused guests. "What are you doing?" But Elena continued, her voice now carrying throughout the church. "I came back to Dust Valley because the Caldwell family threatened my parents' financial security. I agreed to this marriage because I was coerced." She looked directly at Thomas Sr., who had half risen from his seat in the front row. "Because the Caldwells believe everything and everyone can be bought." "That's enough," Thomas Sr. said loudly, fully standing now. Clearly the bride is having a moment of anxiety. "Let's take a brief recess." "I'm not finished," Elena said, her voice cutting through his with surprising authority. "The people of this town deserve to know the truth about the family that controls their lives." She reached into a hidden pocket in her wedding dress and pulled out the USB drive Rebecca had given her, holding it up for all to see. On this drive is evidence that Caldwell Enterprises has been bribing government officials to approve a resort development that will drain the local aquifer and destroy the livelihoods of dozens of farming families. Evidence that they have falsified environmental reports and manipulated water rights to create artificial scarcity they can exploit for profit. Sheriff Dave Miller started moving up the aisle, but Elena continued, her words coming faster now. This evidence has already been sent to the State Attorney General, the FBI, and 3 major newspapers. By tonight, it will be public knowledge. She looked at Thomas, whose face had shifted from shock to fury. And there's one more truth that needs to be spoken today. She turned to Michael, who stood frozen beside Thomas, his expression a mask of panic. Thomas is in love with his best man, Michael Reyes. They have been in a relationship for years, hidden from this community and from Thomas's family because of fear and shame. The church erupted in chaos. Margaret Caldwell let out a cry of distress, while Thomas Sr. bellowed denials. Thomas himself stood speechless, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. Michael took a half-step back, as if trying to physically distance himself from the accusation. "I don't say this to harm them," Elena continued, raising her voice above the commotion. "Love is never something to be ashamed of. I say it because we all deserve to live in truth, not in shadows created by fear and prejudice." Sheriff Miller reached the altar and took Elena's arm. "I think that's enough, Ms. Martinez." Elena nodded, surprisingly calm. "Yes, I believe it is." She looked out at the stunned congregation, her eyes finding Rebecca's in the crowd. "I'm sorry for the disruption, but not for the truth. Never for the truth." As the sheriff led Elena back down the aisle, the church dissolved into confusion. Guests stood and whispered to each other, some heading for the exits, others approaching the Caldwells with questions or expressions of support. Thomas Sr. was on his phone, his face purple with rage, while his wife sobbed quietly beside him. Thomas and Michael remained at the altar, separated now by several feet, neither looking at the other, the truth of their relationship hanging in the air between them like an invisible wall. Rebecca made her way through the crowd toward the side door where she had seen the sheriff lead Elena. Mark caught up with her halfway. "Did you know she was going to do that?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "No," Rebecca replied honestly. "I knew she had a plan, but nothing like this." She pushed through a group of departing guests. "We need to find her." They exited the church into the blinding sunlight, where more chaos awaited. News of the disrupted wedding had spread quickly, and a crowd had gathered outside, including several environmental activists who had been protesting the Caldwell development. They were chanting now, energized by the rumors of Elena's accusations. Rebecca spotted Sheriff Miller's patrol car parked near the church steps, but there was no sign of Elena or the sheriff. She approached a deputy who was attempting to manage the growing crowd. "Where did Sheriff Miller take the bride?" she asked, showing her press badge. The deputy shook his head. "Not authorized to say, ma'am. Please step back." "She's my friend," Rebecca insisted. "I need to know she's safe." "She's fine," came a voice behind her. Rebecca turned to find Dave Miller approaching, looking harried but composed. "She asked me to give you this." He handed her a sealed envelope. "She's on her way to the airport. Said she'd call you when she landed." Rebecca took the envelope, relief washing over her. "She's not under arrest?" The sheriff's expression was carefully neutral. "No laws were broken in there, Ms. Harmon. Embarrassing the Caldwells isn't a crime, though they might wish it was." He glanced back at the church, where Thomas Sr. could be seen in heated conversation with several men in expensive suits. "Not yet, anyway." As the sheriff moved away to deal with the growing crowd, Rebecca opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Elena's handwriting. "Rebecca, by the time you read this, I'll be on my way to Phoenix, where my cousin is expecting me. The documents are safe, and the truth will finally come out. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you my plan. I needed your genuine reactions for credibility. The Caldwells taught me that power lies in controlling the narrative. Today, I took that power back, not just for myself, but for everyone they've hurt. Thank you for being the friend who always believed in me, even when I couldn't tell you everything. I'll call when it's safe. With love and gratitude, Elena. Rebecca read the note twice, then passed it to Mark. As he read, her phone buzzed with a news alert from her own paper's website. Breaking. State Attorney General announces investigation into Caldwell Enterprises following wedding scandal. She did it, Mark said, looking up from the letter. She actually took them down. Rebecca nodded, watching as Thomas Sr. was escorted to his car by security personnel, reporters shouting questions that he ignored. Thomas Jr. and Michael left the church separately, both surrounded by handlers who kept the press at bay. The carefully orchestrated wedding had become a public relations nightmare for the Caldwell family, their secrets and schemes exposed to the harsh light of day. What happens now? Mark asked as they moved away from the crowd. Rebecca thought about Elena, flying toward a new beginning, and about the town of Dust Valley, suddenly facing an uncertain future, without the controlling influence of its most powerful family. Now the truth does what truth always does, she said, remembering the inscription in Elena's locket. It comes to light. In the months that followed, the full extent of the Caldwell family's corruption was revealed through investigations and court proceedings. The resort development was permanently halted, and water rights were returned to the local farmers. Thomas Sr. and several government officials faced federal charges, while Thomas Jr. resigned from the family business and moved to California, where he and Michael eventually acknowledged their relationship publicly. Elena testified against the Caldwells in exchange for immunity, using part of her settlement to establish a foundation supporting environmental protection and rural economic development in communities like Dust Valley. She never returned to the town, but her presence remained in the positive changes that took root after the Caldwell influence had been removed. And Rebecca documented it all, transforming her father's struggling newspaper into a respected voice for accountability and transparency. The truth had come to light, not in a blinding flash, but in the steady illumination of facts and courage, changing forever the landscape of the small desert town that had lived too long in the shadows of power. I've watched this far. If you enjoyed this story about standing up for truth and justice, please hit the like button, leave a comment below saying, "I've watched this far," so I can get to know you, and share this video with someone who appreciates stories about courage in the face of corruption. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another chapter of these emotional, thought-provoking narratives that reflect real human struggles and triumphs.